Prince and Princess of Wales were the fairy tale couple adored around the world, and really the breakup of their marriage has been a tragedy, not just for Britain, but for the monarchy.
The very public and painful split, most evident on an official visit to Korea in 1992, is the price paid for being born royal.
Prince Charles, by his own admission, was not looking for a wife that he could fall in love with, but with a partner to share duties. I think the problem certainly for the Princess of Wales, was that her husband, Prince Charles, had effectively a surrogate marriage, virtually from the word go, with the wife of one of his best friends, Camilla Parker Bowles.
Such relationships are nothing new to the royal family. Camilla herself once reminded Charles of this.
There was the famous moment when they first met back in the 70s, when Camilla, the great-granddaughter of Alice Keppel, favourite mistress of his great-great-grandfather Edward VII, reminded Prince Charles of this fact and said, "So how about it then?" And that was how their relationship began, and that's one of the aspects of Camilla that rather appeals to the man in the street, who otherwise can't understand why on earth this man left Diana for this not so obviously attractive woman.
For a man under pressure, polo is a vital outlet for Charles's frustration. The seeds of this frustration, and his broken marriage, like that of his brother and sister, were perhaps sown by the pressures of an earlier generation. Charles was expected to be like his father.
Well, Philip was a very, Prince Philip, dynamic, macho figure, and he longed for his son, his eldest son and heir, to be exactly the same. And he used to get terribly irritated with Prince Charles, who was a very introspective little boy who cried easily and dithered a bit. And Prince Philip used to get quite enraged about this, and of course thought the only thing he could do was to send him to Gordonston. But the result was that it didn't turn Prince Charles into a sort of clone of his father. It made him more inward-looking, and many people have seen Prince Charles bursting into tears at the lunch table with his father chivying him about something, being angry with him. And this is as a grown man. And also was Prince Philip, who chivied him into marrying the Princess of Wales, Lady Diana, because he felt it was time. And not many men actually would be bullied into a marriage by their father, but he was. It's a very uneasy relationship.
A child from a broken home, Prince Philip was lonely and unloved. At their engagement in 1947, Princess Elizabeth loved him passionately.
She met him when she was 13 years old. He was a young man of, let's see, he must have been about 18, very good looking, like all the Mountbattens, and she fell for him. They became quite friendly, and he, in an elder brotherly way, used to write to her. Now, it's not every sort of 18, 19-year-old young man in the Navy who writes to 13, 14-year-old girls. So there was obviously a liking there from the start. They definitely chose each other. That was definitely a love match. He was strong, he was manly, he was strict when he needed to be. He was exactly the sort of character that she needed behind her as queen.
In public, he was in the shadow of his wife, but in private, it was Prince Philip who ruled the roost.
In public terms, I think Prince Philip's been an excellent consort to the Queen. You could almost compare him with Dennis Thatcher and Margaret. It's very difficult for a forthright man of strong views to surrender his identity to his wife, to walk one pace behind her and so on. He's had constant difficulties with that, but he may have put the odd foot wrong, made the odd inappropriate remark, but beyond that, he's done extremely well.
The dashing young prince often found the restrictions of royal life boring. Without a proper job, he explored life outside the palace walls.
I think what is extraordinary is the way that all the rumours about his private life that one hears if one moves in these circles have never become public. Kitty Kelly is famously writing a book about him at the moment that may alter all that. But one of the questions I'm constantly asked is, how's Philip got away from it, with it all these years? And until a few years ago, to attack Philip would have been to attack the Queen, so he was hors de combat, he was beyond the pale. I think that may be coming to an end now, and I suspect the next few years may hold some difficulties for Philip, in which he might choose quite rightly, to reach for his lawyers.
The second child, Anne, had an equally troubled marriage. After 16 years, Princess Anne and Captain Mark Phillips separated, despite the fact that her family thought she had made the perfect match.
They fell in love and wanted to get married. They were both interested in horses, which is a great interest. They're both extremely good at horsemanship. But I simply don't think he was up to it. It's not easy for a man to be married to a woman whose family is much more important than his own, whose income is much bigger than his own, whose profile is enormously higher than his own. This is the problem for current royals. Because of the demise of so many other royal families, or the lack of respectability that some of them have suffered, it's very difficult for them to find anyone suitable to marry who's got comparable status to theirs.
Today, many regard the Princess Royal as one of the mainstays of the royal family because of her large number of public engagements and particularly her work for Save the Children. But in the past, her pushy and willful manner has brought criticism.
She is rather full of herself. She is very like her father, Prince Philip. And she has not endeared herself to the nation. She's done some very good work, so there is no doubt of that, but that's her job, basically. She gets paid for it, and she gets a very nice car to drive around and a wonderful wardrobe of clothes. She lives in a fabulous house and has got, and although she's got a tiny flat in Dolphin Square, she goes there. She lives the life of Riley, and we would expect her to do the things that she does.
In December 1992, Princess Anne, now divorced, married a former equerry to the Queen, Royal Navy Commander Tim Lawrence, at a low-key ceremony at Crathy Church close to Balmoral. By marrying in Scotland, Princess Anne neatly sidestepped a potential confrontation with the Church of England over the remarriage of a divorced member of the royal family. As the next defender of the faith, Prince Charles looks at his sister and dwells on the difficulties of his position.
The divorce of Princess Anne, Princess Royal, from Mark Phillips barely caused a ripple in the royal scene and didn't dent her image one little bit. She just carried on as if nothing had happened. The palace went out of its way to say, when there was a separation, A, that there were no plans for divorce, which we knew was absolute rubbish, because they knew, Mark and Anne both knew when they got separated that they were going to be divorced within 2 years. And when they were divorced, the palace then said there was no third party involved. And we all knew that at that time she had a friendship with Tim Lawrence, because letters written by him to her and her to him had been stolen by somebody, presumably in the palace, and had been made public.
The theft of Anne's love letters to Tim Lawrence publicly confirmed their secret affair and focused attention on yet another royal partner.
Tim Lawrence is quite extraordinary in that he comes from a background which couldn't be further removed from Princess Anne's. I mean, if he tried, he comes from a working-class background. But strangely enough, since he's been in the royal family, he's become even more royal than the royals and indistinguishable from any of them. He looks like them, he dresses like them, he even talks like them. And as somebody unkindly said to me a few days ago back in Palace, he's taken on this air of assumed aristocracy.
Prince Philip, like so many fathers, was determined to bring up his children in his own way. He forced them to follow in his own footsteps. Prince Andrew met the physical and intellectual demands of Gordonston more easily than his brothers. He graduated with 3 A-levels before beginning naval training at Dartmouth. Like his father and his sister Anne, Andrew does not always stand on ceremony.
The obstacle's that way, we want to see it. So that way, somewhere over there. Come on. Not for your benefit, just please move.
He's been described as boorish and uneducated, and other people say that he's remarkably sensitive. I know people who have worked with him and for him, and they said he can be a bit like his father, give you a real dressing down for no apparent reason, and the next moment he can be so thoughtful, so completely and absolutely thoughtful. He's not, I understand, a very cerebral man. He's not one of the deep thinkers of this world, but the very fact that he's qualified as a helicopter pilot and he's now commanding his own ship, HMS Cottesmore, leads one to believe that he does possess a rare amount of intelligence.
Andrew found Sarah's boisterous tendencies mirrored his own. Her easy manner fitted in well with other members of his family. Unlike Diana, she had had relationships with other men, but this was not seen as a serious obstacle for the wife of a second son. It seemed on the surface to be a good match.
We're a good team, anyway.
Yes, I think that's a saving grace, is the fact that in the last 9 months we've discovered that we work very well together.
We're good friends, good team. Quite happy, very happy.
Their marriage was solemnised amid a fanfare of goodwill, optimism and affection.
I think they're a very ill-matched pair. I mean, there are some people who simply should not marry each other. She, because she had a broken romance herself, was probably at a low ebb and perhaps looked a bit more vulnerable than she later turned out to be.
When he found Sarah, he found somebody very much like himself, you see, somebody who also needed a lot of input, because Sarah, after all, had been rather shortchanged as a child. You know, her mother had left her when she was only 12 years old, and she hoped that he was going to be able to provide for her. But he wasn't able to provide for her any more than any of the Windsors are able really satisfactorily to provide for their partners, because they're looking for something from them. They're not looking or realizing that they have to give something to them.
After her marriage, Sarah, now a royal wife, moved into Buckingham Palace.
I believe that if Andrew hadn't gone away to a Navy college in just days after they married, leaving Fergie alone and rather depressed at Buckingham Palace in the early days of their marriage, they may have worked something out. But the combination of living in that great mausoleum that we call Buckingham Palace, there's constant spotlight, the constant publicity, the endless criticism, not just from courtiers but also from the media. It wore Fergie down to such an extent that when she wanted the man in her life to be by her side, he was either away at sea or on a Navy course.
For Charles and Diana, the pressures were different. Expectations were high, but what were the real reasons for the split?
It's very difficult to know what Charles expected. I think he was actually pushed into it. He was 32. And the idea at the time was that if he didn't marry soon, he wouldn't be able to marry a virgin unless it was at a very great distance in age. Diana was around at the time. She seemed suitable at the time. She was just about old enough at the time. Philip was getting fed up with Charles not being married, and the press were speculating all the time. I think they got married because it was politic to do so within the royal family. It was necessary for him to get married, so he did.
Diana has now admitted that from the very beginning she found the pressures of royal life unbearable. She was suffering from the eating disorder, bulimia. At one point, her self-esteem was so low that she injured herself through self-mutilation. But these cracks went undetected by her adoring public, as her appearance convinced everybody that she was a happily married woman. Her popularity was immense, and Charles stood by as she became the centre of attention.
Mio marito ed io siamo molto felici di essere qui. Work that out.
Salute. Now could you translate?
My husband and I are very happy to be here.
I think they both have always competed with each other, competed for love, because neither of them had it. Although Diana was brought up by her father as far as he possibly could, nevertheless, he sent her away to boarding school as soon as it was possible to do so. Charles also needed love because he didn't grow up with enough of it. So therefore, when they met each other, they were both very needy. Neither of them had much to give, but both of them had a lot to take. And they looked to each other to provide each one of them with love and attention, and neither of them could do that because they hadn't got it to give.
I don't think Prince Charles was prepared to ever deal with a woman like Diana, for instance. So you could say that he was unprepared to deal with a kind of tempestuous woman that she is.
Unable to recognise his wife's needs, Charles consoled himself in the arms of his mistress, Camilla Parker Bowles.
Camilla was a very attractive woman. I mean, not beautiful or anything like that, but she's a very womanly woman. The sort of woman I'd say that a lot of men would like to meet. Someone who was for them. And what a prince lacks and what a king lacks is often someone who is there for them as a person.
Camilla possibly was able to also tune into what Charles's needs were. And I'm not sure whether it's fair to say that Camilla is of a different social class to Charles, but certainly she is not quite the same in terms of her manner. Diana is very regal. She behaves like a queen. She's a royal princess. Camilla is not.
Stories about their real lives began to leak out. Diana was a lonely, unhappy princess suffering from bulimia, married to an uncaring husband.
There was a war of the Waleses, and there was a lot of sniping at each other from their deeply entrenched positions via friends. And that was bad for business. It was bad for royal business to do all of that. And, of course, Prince Charles himself tried never to be a party to it, and he did ask all his friends not to say anything unkind about his wife, to his credit. But some of his friends took it on themselves because they felt so sorry for him to speak out.
Soon, transcripts of a telephone conversation appeared between Diana and James Gilby.
It's just so difficult, so complicated. He makes my life real torture, I've decided.
This scandal was closely followed by the even more shocking publication of a taped telephone conversation allegedly between Charles and Camilla.
Neil, so good at feeling all way along. Oh, just what a feel my way along you. I can't bear a Sunday night without you.
You can't get much lower than that in terms of public esteem. I mean, in many respects, he's the Hugh Grant of the royal family. And to that extent, he knows and recognises that he has an uphill struggle.
With the charade of the royal marriage exposed, Charles sought refuge amongst the ancient ruins of Turkey, while his estranged wife was alone on royal duties in Egypt.
I think both are far happier apart than they ever were together. It's a great tragedy, not just for the couple themselves and for the individual members of the royal family, but for the monarchy and for Britain, that neither the Prince nor the Princess of Wales could feel that they could stay together.
At the Taj Mahal, the monument to eternal love, Diana posed alone for photographers.
I don't think he let her go. I think she chose to go. And I think he fought right until the end to keep her, because he felt that that was the right thing to do. Whether it made him happy or not was irrelevant for him. He was trying to keep his family together for the sake of his children and for the sake of the monarchy, trying to preserve a united front. Of course, it's an irreconcilable breach. They'll never be man and wife ever again, and a divorce is inevitable. But I think that she certainly wanted out, and she got what she wanted.
Prince Charles has revealed his soul in his documentary and also in his Kiss and Tell biography, where he told the world that he didn't really love the Princess of Wales, that his father, Prince Philip, forced him into marriage.
Charles, introspective, sensitive, and always yearning to do better than his father, has failed. Has his rigid and traditional upbringing created a lonely royal adult?
I don't think he's lonely. I think he's an eternal bachelor. I think that he has his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, and that will continue. He has a lot of people around him to keep him from feeling lonely. And what he likes is, he likes to think that he's lonely. He's a rather melancholic figure. You can picture him in his study late at night, writing up his notes, which he does every day, of what's happened in the day, and he will say, "Oh God, the loneliness of this job." But actually, he is an eternal bachelor. He doesn't really want to be around women that much, you know, just occasionally. But most of the time, he'd rather be on his own, I think.
He can do exactly what he wants. He goes painting, he goes and plays polo, he can fall off his horse, he now has a burgeoning business portfolio which takes his interest. So in many respects, Prince Charles is enjoying a golden era in terms of his personal life.
Following her divorce, Camilla Parker Bowles has moved just a few miles away from Highgrove, Charles's Gloucestershire home. Camilla is now free to marry again.
I believe that Charles is still feels that Camilla's the only real woman in his life, the only one that's understood him. He feels he'd like to be dependent on her. She's now, as we know, divorced and free, but I don't think the public would accept her as his wife. And I think if the price of his personal happiness, marrying Camilla, retiring to Highgrove and doing organic farming, was giving up the throne, I think there might come a point, and that might be it, where his mother, the Queen, who is the key person in this, might say, with political advice, "Charles, if you're going to marry Camilla, that's it, step aside, you give up, you hand over to William, a young, dashing monarch, and the Republican cause is set back 50 years.
The British royal family has seen the collapse of 3 marriages in the past few years. The pressure of life in the world's most public family seems too much for them to bear. Does the House of Windsor carry a seam of unhappiness through the generations? Prince Edward looks set to marry. What are his chances of success?
If Edward marries Sophie, the next story that the tabloids are all waiting for, that has to be super glue. That marriage cannot go wrong. What will be interesting is where that marriage is held. Princes of Wales traditionally got married in the private chapel at Windsor. To the end of the 19th century, these weddings are a 20th century House of Windsor invention that have rebounded on them now. Bernard Levin famously said, "Are we going to get all the money back that we expended on these weddings? Now these weddings are over. Shall we have a ceremony called the Sundering of the Ties, held in Green Park, where all the money's handed back? What about all the public goodwill, the public emotion, the public disillusion that's gone in the collapse of these marriages?" So if Edward marries Sophie, he's got to stay married, whatever happens within that marriage.
In looks and style, Sophie Rhys-Jones has been compared to Princess Diana, but for her to succeed in the royal family, the comparisons must stop there. Successful in her own right as a professional woman, Sophie promises to be a good partner for Edward. They have lived together at Buckingham Palace virtually as husband and wife. Before their marriage, she has been able to get a feel for life in the public eye and behind the palace walls.
The royal family now want a period of calm. They want to preserve the status quo. Obviously, they want any talk of a divorce put on the back burner, both between the Prince and Princess of Wales and also the Duke and Duchess of York. They are aware that they did very well during the VE Day celebrations, where the royal family led the nation in the celebrations of the end of the war in Europe. And they don't want to see any great publicity cataclysms descend on the House of Windsor, certainly for the foreseeable future.